here we are. I'll have more creative and fun ideas as we go forward, but I want questions. I want questions and not answers yet. So where do we start? Do you want to start with the coaching staff? Kevin Stefanski is gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no offensive coordinator.
Yep.
There is now no defensive coordinator.
Well, there is one of those.
But there is not, because George Edwards left.
Yeah, well, George was.
And there is no
God
defensive
bless him.
back coach, which is pretty interesting to me. Jerry Gray has been integral in developing.
Can I start with
all
a
these
question
guys.
to you to tap your knowledge of this team and the infrastructure of how things work?
You may.
Okay. Mike Zimmer's press conference this morning, which I listened to. Here's my question. Is Mike Zimmer saying things that Mike Zimmer has done? I mean, coaching staff for the first time, week off, right? George is leaving, and it's not really made crystal clear why. Did George choose to leave because he wants to call defensive plays? Was George asked not to come back? And then, obviously, this didn't get in the press conference because it was after the fact, but Jerry Gray. Did Mike call Jerry Gray in today and say, Jerry, you're being let go? Or did somebody call Mike in and say, Mike, you're going to let Jerry Gray go because the cornerbacks didn't play as well? How much do you think is Mike Zimmer actively making moves, and how much is Mike reflecting? Because anyone in authority who's told to do something doesn't say, well, the Wilfs and Rick Spielman are making me fire George or Jerry Gray or making me give guys a week off. They make it sound like it's their idea. How much of this do you think is actually Mike doing things different and Mike possibly making moves? And how much do you think is Mike being told, this is hey, look, hot shot, this is no longer your show solely. We're tired of this act. We're not firing you, but we're going to make moves, and you are going to explain them.
It's a really good question. And of course, if you're sending someone out to explain them, Mike's not your guy, because if he doesn't have an answer, he's just not going to give you an answer. It's going to be Mike Zimmer, no matter what. After 2016, they made a bunch of coaching changes on the offensive side. They got a new receivers coach, and there were a couple other ones. New offensive line. No, Tony Sperano was still the offensive line coach, but maybe a new tight ends coach. And they just shuffled around some things. And we didn't really think too much of it at the time. But I wonder, when it's looked at as the defense was not what it was before, if some people decided, collectively or not, there's got to be some sort of change here, because we didn't achieve what we were supposed to achieve on the defensive side. And maybe we need to shake things up and get a few new people around Mike, a few new ideas and so forth, because we kind of gone as far as we can go with this group. And it's been the same message with these coaches for a very long time with these players. And there are going to be new players who come in, and maybe we need some different voices. I would also look at it as with George, I don't know whose choice that was, if it was George's or Mike's. I think it was George's.
Okay.
I think that, and this is just, that's a complete guess. I'm not 100% sure, but my speculation would be that every year Zimmer would talk about potentially handing over play calling duties to George Edwards. And he never did. The one time George called the defense was against Dallas on a Thursday night color rush game against a Dak Prescott rookie-led team that went 13-3 and dominated and was amazing that year on offense and nearly beat Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs, if not for some Rodgers magic. And they held them to, I believe, 17 points that night. George called a great game. Danielle Hunter dominated and so forth. And I wonder if it always stuck in George's mind that, man, I'm an experienced defensive coordinator and I know this defense and I could be calling this defense. And here is my head coach who refuses to hand over these duties. Even Andy Reid has handed over his play calling duties to his coaches before. And there was they showed yesterday Eric Bieniemy even calling plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Doug Peterson called plays before he got a head coaching job for the Chiefs at times. And Zimmer was just never willing to do that. And every time we would ask him, he would say, well, I don't want to second guess George. I was like, well, that's not a very good explanation from a head coach for why you won't hand over the duties. Right. And look, that's his right. He's the head coach and he's the defensive guru and everything else. But if you're Edwards, you might be saying, we've been a top 5 defense in either yards or points every year since I've been here, and I get no credit because I don't call the plays. I don't get the head coaching interviews, except for the Rooney Rule ones that people don't take as seriously as they should. And how am I ever going to move up? And I know that Edwards was interested in pursuing after 2015 and 2016, pursuing a potential head coaching job at some point and has gotten zero buzz whatsoever on that, despite being the head of one of the best defensive organizations in the entire NFL. So if you're him, you probably got to the end of your contract and said, you know what? Might want to try something else. And if it times up with Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, and then you go there and Sheldon Richardson gets 12 sacks or something, and they're great. If Cleveland's great, everybody on that staff is going to get phone calls. So I think that it might be an individual to individual different situations for why these things are changing. Edwards, I could understand. Jerry Gray, I'm not really sure. I don't know why they would want to move on from him, but maybe Zimmer wants help developing new rookie corners because that's what they're probably going to draft.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense. It's just I don't buy it when a coach all of a sudden makes changes on a side of the ball for which he absolutely is involved and loves, and just say, "Oh yeah, he's just tired of Jerry Gray."
Yeah,
Jerry Gray's a really good defensive mind.
Yeah,
he's a really good cornerbacks coach.
Yep, and he was a defensive coordinator once.
Exactly. So I found it intriguing today when Mike says, "Yeah, they're all taking a week off now for the first time." It's like that strikes me as somebody came to Mike and said, "You're going to want to rethink how you do things." And then Mike, of course, says, "Well, it's just my idea."
Yeah, and I couldn't help thinking today about Zimmer talking to us about his conversation with Bill Parcells about getting over the hump. And as we talk about our biggest offseason questions here, getting over the hump, how they're going to do it is number one by far. How can you be better than a first round out against Seattle? How can you be better than a NFC championship game against the Eagles? How can you be better than a divisional game against the New Orleans Saints? You have 2 playoff wins in Zimmer's entire era. You could certainly do worse than they've done under Mike Zimmer. We've seen that with this organization before. You could do a hell of a lot worse with, look at all these teams. Look at Cleveland. How many times have they built up their talent and they get a schmo as a coach and then it ends up not working out and so forth? You could do a lot worse. And that was my case about keeping Mike Zimmer and not moving on from him.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking for what the answer is to get them over the top, a lot of things went right for this team this year. A lot of stars actually aligned for this team. This was not a situation where, wow, like the Eagles, we lost every player we had and we made the playoffs. Good for us. We really just grinded through that season to even get in the postseason and finish the year with a backup quarterback. No. This was, everyone was healthy. Everything was in place. Your offensive coordinator was great. Gary was here and everything else. And getting to another level up after this, I don't have
here's where I struggle.
An answer.
Here's where I struggle mightily with this entire conversation that we are having 2 days after an embarrassing loss, and it was embarrassing, to San Francisco. They got drubbed in Philadelphia, absolutely run off the field in the NFC title game to end the 2017 season. And yet the next day I woke up and thought to myself, I think they're really close. I mean, they got drubbed, they got embarrassed, but I think this is really close. 13-3. With Case, go out and get a quarterback, which they did. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking to myself, to use a word that the Wild has employed previously, which I hate for them, but actually at the time thought made sense for the Vikings, they need a few tweaks. And if they make a few tweaks, they're a Super Bowl team. Seriously. They are a potential,
always got to get hockey in there.
They're a potential championship team. Well, it's because the Wild and Vikings, to me, at different times now, very much alike.
Yeah.
I woke up yesterday and thought to myself, this team's nowhere near close. This team has taken its shot. This team has shot its 3-pointer and it missed. And they're still a playoff team. They're still a well-run team. They're still a stable team. But as far as if we're talking about just flat out 2020 season championships, I can't in good conscience say I think that they're close. And so now my question is, what do you do? And are you willing to make the moves and take the shots that it's going to take to get back to being a championship team? Because that's going to be some frightening moves that might not work. But if you don't take them, I think you're going to go into the rut that the Wild did, which is you still can make the playoffs, you still can sell tickets, you're still good. But do you have the potential then with a tweak here or there to be great? With the 2019 Vikings and the 2020, Matthew, I don't see that.
So last year, going into last offseason, I thought that they were a scheme change and a few offensive players away from being a great team this year. And, you and I both picked them to be 10-6, which is what they ended up being. And maybe if they played hard in week 17, we'd be saying, well, they were 11-5, it's your final record. So, but they're that kind of team. but they were more talented than that this year. And all the opportunities were there this year to make yourself a 14-2, a 13-3 team. Those opportunities were right there, right at your doorstep, and you were not able to take advantage of them in all the weeks that you can name quickly, week 2, week 4, against Kansas City, against Green Bay again on Monday Night Football. And now I wonder about going down the other side of the mountain a little bit, because you had a lot of things go right for you to be in situations where you could have won this division. You even went into that game against the Packers with a small chance of winning the division and still couldn't get that done. And now you're saying, well, you've got to be better than you were this year when a lot of things aligned correctly. And the last time we had that conversation was after the NFC Championship game, where you and I must have felt differently, because I felt like they were going to go 8-8 the next year. And I remember talking with our friend Robert Mays from The Ringer at training camp before 2018 and saying, I don't think this is going to go well. Like, I think this is going to be a major disappointment in the first year. And it was.
Did you feel that way, though, immediately after the game itself?
I did. Yeah. No,
Before they signed Cousins and then they get Cousins?
Yep. I did.
Because I felt good about the direction at that time if they made the right moves.
I didn't, because it's hard to be the number one defense again. And it's hard to get that level of quarterback play and offensive coordinator and health and everything else. Health is a huge thing. In 2018, one thing we never talk about, and kicking, by the way, was really good this year. And it was good that year. And we don't talk about those things. Like, we don't talk about how 2017, they just had amazing special teams. The punter didn't have a single touchback, I think, the whole year.
Got him fired.
And this year was kind of the same deal, where I don't think that there's a big difference between this year's team and the 2017 team. I think the difference was Aaron Rodgers got hurt that year by the Vikings, and they got 2 free wins there. And then the schedule was a little bit easier than this year, and they won a couple big games. But I don't think in terms of talent level, it was very different at all. I just think that doing it again, when you're a strong team like this, when you don't have a great quarterback, when you don't have a true playmaking quarterback who can make up for things, that you end up just sort of riding the wave for what you have in terms of luck and in terms of roster talent and what you have in terms of scheme and play calling and all those different things. You just ride that wave with your quarterback, because you're never going to be 1% better than your roster and then who's calling the plays.
I'll give you the one difference, or the one significant difference that I see between 17 and 19, though. And it's only a 2-year difference, but it's a big deal. It's age. It's age of players.
Oh, yes.
It's age of your coach, who's now 63 instead of 61.
Yep.
It's age of I guess my question is, age-wise, this is a sport that's brutal, and you wear down quick, and you cannot be this is a sport where it sounds good to be loyal to veteran players, but ultimately that can be absolutely stupid.
Yes.
And so now my question is, you've now run this back quite a bit. How many times can you continue to say it's going to work? You know, Harrison Smith is still a very good player. Is he the same player that he was in 2017?
We don't know if Anthony Harris is staying.
No, exactly. And you know what? Here's the problem. If you look at the evaluation of positions and what Anthony Harris is going to get paid, there's a pretty compelling case to be made that he shouldn't stay, that he's going to be paid too much.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference for me. Is I looked at the 17 team and said, oh, good young components still exist.
Yeah.
And now 2 years after the fact, I say everybody's older, and I've seen this play before. And at some point you got to say, gentlemen, it's been nice, but a lot of you got to go.
See, I think that things aligned, but they aligned in a different way in 2017. The biggest way that they aligned was Aaron Rodgers got hurt, and you ended up winning the division and getting a week off in a home playoff game.
Yeah.
That's where it was very different than this year, but your sort of luck fell into place. With this year, it was your luck fell into place in Kirk Cousins having his best career year under Kevin Stefanski and under Gary Kubiak. And you don't know if you're going to be able to repeat that. Usually a career year is a career year for a reason, that it's hard to do again. And even if Kirk is in the same system, is he going to have the same chemistry that he had with Kevin Stefanski? Is your schedule going to be this easy? This was, if you remember, the 9th easiest schedule in Minnesota Vikings history, according to Pro Football Reference. So it's unlikely you're going to have that again. And what you mentioned, the health and the age of the players, Harrison Smith was still the 3rd best safety by PFF. At some point, he's probably going to drift down. And Everson Griffin might not even be here. He was great again this season. overall, I mean, there were dips at times in his play, as you will have for older players, but for the most part, he was absolutely phenomenal. He might not even be here, and if he does come back, it's going to be hard to repeat this again. Linval Joseph, in my mind, is done being a great player. As much as I love and respect Linval, love watching him play, and I think he's one of those heart and soul players. He's not the same as he was in 2017. So you're just not going to be able to get back what you even had this year, I think, unless there are some pretty serious changes this offseason. So my biggest question would be, do you kind of run back as much as you possibly can and see what you can do, but draft a first round quarterback? Do you go very radical and start, trading away players? And boy, I love emails with trade proposals. That's not a joke. I love them. I think they're great. I got one this morning about trading Dalvin Cook to Miami to see if you could get Tua and hoping that they're crazy and stupid, which you never know. Somebody traded a first-round pick for Trent Richardson.
For sure.
But trading Dalvin Cook is an interesting idea.
Yep.
And then there's a little bit of me, Judd, though, that once we start getting with these crazy ideas that I love, and some are awesome, and some are really smart. Let's even say you said, let's trade Adam Thielen and Danielle Hunter in the first to get the second pick or something and take Tua. You go crazy. First of all, we'd have the funnest time ever on Sports Talk Radio arguing about that one. But then, so once I start going like, there's a lot of great trade ideas and draft picks with these quarterbacks, but then you stop and go, wait, is Zimmer going to allow any of this? Does Zimmer still have the power to not allow any of this?
That's my question off today. Yeah. Is his power being stripped?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I think if you have Zimmer in charge, then you sign up for the same thing you've always had with Zimmer, which is he is making the grocery list for players, which means you have to try and convince him to draft quarterback in the first round. I think that is not going to happen. I think they're going to draft a cornerback instead.
And I love, if you could go get Tua, I love that. And I think it would be worth doing. And I agree. I believe that they are going to, at 25, probably being the Vikings, stand pat and draft a cornerback because they are very low on those. But I think here's the starting point of the conversation. I think it goes beyond Mike and it goes beyond Rick. And I think it goes all the way upstairs to New Jersey and the Wilfs.
Yeah.
And what they are willing to do and what they want to do. And the biggest thing that they have to get their head around is this. When they bought the team, Matthew, they wanted two things. Lifelong Giants fans. And laugh now, but in 2005 or so, the Giants had been incredibly stable. And the Giants were stable for a long time. Lifelong Giants fans, the Wilfs wanted two things. They wanted a stability that this franchise, despite its successes, had lacked for a long time. Love boat, embarrassing things.
Yeah, sure.
Mike Tice selling tickets, scalping Super Bowl tickets. Okay, they wanted stability and then championships. They've got the stability.
Yeah.
The new stadium's gorgeous. Practice facility, gorgeous.
Yep.
The GM is, we can complain about him, but he's a stable GM type of executive. Front office, same thing. Head coach, really the same thing. Doesn't embarrass you. And so you've got the stability. You don't have the championships. But to get to the championship, you might have to strip away the stability. And that's the scary notion. Are you willing to fire people and make changes? Because you know what? If she backfires, my boy, you got 3 or 4 4-win seasons now. It doesn't happen to this franchise.
Yep, that's true.
There's a lot of tough decisions. So the question is, do you like the marriage that you're in? Which is, but you know what? You get dinner every night. Everybody's happy. Everybody sits around and chats and exchanges niceties. Or do you take that step?
Let me ask you a very difficult question. Would it have been better for the Vikings? And you know that I was not on board with let's just fire Mike Zimmer and get rid of that stability and get rid of a very, very good football coach. But would it have been better in terms of where you probably have to go if they had lost by 30 points in New Orleans? Because if you're a fan of the Vikings, you got kicked in the groin either way. Because you had to watch that game against San Francisco, which if you're a fan of the Vikings was probably soul-sucking. When your quarterback just keeps dropping back and getting sacked and getting sacked and getting sacked. I'm sure that's horrible to have to watch. As a fan. So either way, you had to live through a terrible playoff game where you were punched in the gut after being excited all week.
Right.
You did get a great moment that was super fun in New Orleans, and I had a great time covering that game. I've never covered one like it. and I ate a lot of food in New Orleans, but would it have been better because it would have kickstarted a major change in the organization to have lost that game by 30 points.
And if that had happened, there's a chance that the guy who is currently the Vikings head coach is head coach of Dallas.
Well, that's
because
what I mean.
I don't dismiss the fact that that whole McCarthy thing seemed very oddly timed, as if Mike was the second choice to Zimmer, but then Mike won. Would it have been better in the long run? That depends on the one answer to the question that we don't have, which is, how would the Wilfs proceed? What would they do? Do they know what they're doing? Because this is all about trust from a fan standpoint.
Yeah.
So if I said, I think the Wilfs are great football people, then my answer is yes. I think they're great football fans. And that's why I think they're scared here, because they've got good, solid football people. Spielman and I know they got their faults, but they're good, solid football guys. But are they going to get you a championship? You know what? It sure looks like it's going to come up short to me.
Yeah. Well,
it's a fun conversation.
But that's part of it, is can they get you a championship usually revolves on who? The quarterback.
Absolutely.
That's what it revolves on in the NFL.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So if you're looking at it from that perspective, then you almost wish Kirk choked, because if he chokes and he plays horribly in New Orleans, then the ownership is going to look at it and say, oh, he can't do it. He just simply cannot win a playoff game. He's not good enough. And you guys have to go draft the next quarterback and develop him over the 2020 season and so forth. Like that would have kicked in a lot of things that maybe they need, wouldn't it?
Not only that, but so here's my new opinion on Kirk. And I'm going to say the words that drive Matthew Collar crazy. And I don't mean them specifically related to how Kirk played on Saturday. It's not Kirk's fault, but this game, the National Football League game right now, has evolved and gotten to a point where guys like Kirk are no longer, unless they are, and I don't even know this, but unless they are beyond gifted and great passers, I think the game has just changed too. I think the game has changed. And so when you watch Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, who single-handedly yesterday, I don't know how, kept the Seahawks in that game. When you go down Patrick Mahomes, when you go down the list of what those guys and those kids can do at that position, and then you see Kirk drop back. And when you watch Kirk, it really looks, Matthew, if you took Kirk to 1998, he'd fit right in.
Yep.
And so I think the other question is absolving the name Kirk Cousins of blame here and just saying quarterback A. Does quarterback A work with what you want to do in today's game? And the answer very well just might be no.
Not when he gets sacked all the time. I mean, Sage did some video stuff today that showed that there were opportunities to be had.
I saw a couple of them. They're great.
It was the classic Kirk. Just wouldn't throw the ball.
Yeah.
Just didn't want to try to force it into windows, and sometimes just didn't see it because the rush was getting to him and he was dropping his eyes and so forth.
And you tell me this, who told Kirk within the last 3 weeks or so? Somebody told Kirk, if there's pressure on you, eat the football, because if you don't, you'll fumble. The whole new Kirk drop and roll thing.
That's what they've been telling him for the last 2 years.
Okay, because he was the last 2 games.
Zimmer told him you're going to get people fired if you turn the ball.
Okay.
That's what he told him.
Because he just grabs the ball now like a blanket and holds it and goes down.
Yep. That's exactly what Zimmer told him. But he might as well, because he's never going to escape anyway.
Correct.
And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make. And it's a very annoying argument, I understand. But if you lose in New Orleans by 30 points, then the ownership is saying, okay, well, maybe they stick with Zimmer. But I know who they're not sticking with. It's this quarterback. The fact that he got that win, now you have to decide, if you're the owner, is like, wait, can he do that again? Or is it always going to look like San Francisco?
Which is why I got to go with a guy. I've got to go in the Tua direction. I don't know if it's Tua, but I've got to go in that direction.
Oh,
you have to.
The moving on from Alex Smith to take Patrick Mahomes, the drafting Garoppolo while you still have Brady, the drafting Rodgers, it's the thing to do for sure for the Vikings. I think it's an obvious way to go rather than locking yourself in for a contract extension to this quarterback. But I think the New Orleans win may have influenced the ownership to decide to lock him in. And in that case,
so you're saying Kirk?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh boy.
And if that ends up being the case, then you're probably talking a cap hit of somewhere between $35 and $40 million per year. And you are probably locking yourself into a lot of 8-8, 9-7, 10-6 types of
You
seasons.
really think they looked at that one game and think he is the solution, huh?
Yeah,
Like, you
I don't
watch
know.
this league. If
I
you're a
don't know.
football fan, you watch where this league's going. It's not going anywhere near Kirk Cousins.
I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know exactly what they're thinking because it changes from week to week because they're fans. So you could, the last thing that they saw,
touche, good point.
The last thing they saw in 2017 influenced the entire organization to hire John DeFilippo. For why, I don't know. He just got fired again. But yet my boy Marone survives. But
it's because it was all Flip's fault.
Yeah, I guess
it's always Flip's fault.
I guess so. But Marone and Zimmer have some similarities, by the way. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know if their whims changed or if they saw him win a playoff game and said, well, all we need to do is get that out of him a couple times.
The two guys that I'm going to immediately right now and saying, let's talk extension completely under my terms are Kirk Cousins and Dalvin